Hey. Hit the record button, and all of a sudden Andy's all like kind of tongue-tied.
I don't have any words anymore. We
It's terrible.
This is episode 4 of season 6. This is episode 54. We've been talking, generally 60 card casual. We started off by talking about the MPL, multiplayer limited. We got over to lands, connected that back to Commander, because of course. And then last week, as we all know, we talked about cats, rats, and a beautiful deck of Bruce's. So I'm gonna play our theme song.
Okay.
And when we get back, we're gonna talk about something new-ish.
All right.
Because I don't know how to build a deck. Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I am Bruce.
That's Bruce. As I said, we've talked about lands. We've talked about a cool cat deck, and I think if anything, last week's deck tale has shown us that 60 card decks can have as much personality as a commander deck. And whether you're talking about either format, it's really hard to come up with that character, that panache. I was saying this word earlier. What was it? It was personality. There we go. A deck that has personality stands out. It's fun to play because people recognize it as like, oh, that does a quirky little thing. With the cat rat deck, it does the cats in it really leans on that Hungry Lynx and shapeshifter kind of mirror entity type thing.
Yeah.
Bruce has another deck that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point where it shifts between like playing out Pier and Toothy, who are partners in Battle Bond. But bringing it to a 60-card deck, it gives it, an extra layer of mechanics where you're generally not using the legendary rule as a mechanic. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is 60-card brings this level of, I guess, deck building where you can really lean into the things, or certain things that you can't in Commander. And obviously vice versa.
Right.
And we just kind of wanted to talk about, where we get ideas. I'm going to probably rely on Bruce a little bit more because I feel like I have a handful of decks that do have a bit of personality. But I mean, in terms of 60-card decks, I had a standard-ish playable Goblin deck from like Dominaria period at one point. Right. And my current 60 card decks include a Tressorhorn deck that we built for this show.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that a lot of mine have that much character, but
I've got 15 years plus of building just 60 card casual decks before I even started building Commander decks. So there's a little bit of a bonus there that I got a bit of a head start on you.
Oh yeah. No, I've been building decks for 15 years too. Yep. So like, is it a different experience to like build a 60 card deck than a Commander deck? Like, obviously with Commander it's a Sigilton format, so it's a little different in terms of like, well, now you can have up to 4 of each card. Like, where does that, I guess, spark, no pun intended, come from?
For me, the difference between building Commander versus 60 card, with 60 card, if you want, and this is not how I have always built them, so this is not anything in particular, but I've always felt like with 60 card, you can build a deck around that revolves around 4 different cards or 3 different cards because you can just run multiple copies. So whereas in Commander, if you're trying to set up a combo around 3 or 4 cards, you're looking at a ton of tutors. You just absolutely have tutors. You have to have them. And and then you need to find other cards that will find that can find the tutor or the card you're looking for. And I just feel like so much of your Commander deck then turns into you building this whole thing to try and get to this one spot. And 60 card, it's just, here you go, there are your cards, and just make it, and then you make it work. Like we were talking about the cat rat deck. I keep coming back to this thing, but that deck to me is not a deck that exists in Commander just because it works, because you get an interaction with the links and with another card, or this card and another card, and then if you get 3 or 4 of them out at the same time, then it does something special. You start talking like that in Commander, and then you're just talking Magical Christmas Land, which means that the thing that you really want it to do just can't happen, or it happens so infrequently, you're just not going to have a lot of fun with the deck. So so you can build that part different. On the other hand, there's a deck building premise that started with 60 card tournament decks, with the idea being, if you put 24 lands in a 60 card deck, that leaves you now with 36 cards remaining. So these are the cards you're going to actually add to your, that give your deck the personality. Well, if you're allowed to put 4 copies of every card in the deck, 36 divided by 4, it means you're getting 9. So realistically now, your entire deck revolves around 9 cards. Well, this becomes very easy to build a deck when you're only looking for 9 cards. You start looking for a combo, maybe 3 different cards, and then you've got these other cards that help you ramp or do card draw or whatever, and then bang, you've got your deck. And then you can say that that's very different from Commander, where you've got, if you put 40 cards in, you need 60 cards. But, if you're only looking for 9 different cards, then put 37 land in your deck. Now you have 63. That means you need 7 copies of each card. Instead of putting 4 copies of Cultivate in your deck because you think that that's the best card that you can use for this. It's not, but humor me. Okay, I can use that card, but I'm still looking for 8 others. So now I start searching through and finding other cards. And of those 8 cards, you'll find a whole bunch more. And then you just tailor it to fit whatever theme you're working with. And then suddenly your 60 card casual and your 100 card singleton commander, the deck builds can be very similar if you want to go that route.
Yeah. And so you can have 4, would you say cultivates, in your 60 card, easy. You can obviously find plenty of similar ramp for your commander deck, and easily you can go overboard with that. I know that I have a deck that I'm building right now that I have probably, I say probably, I definitely have too many sources of that type of ramp.
Right.
And I think land ramp is probably an easy example, but when sometimes it gets to be where you want your deck to function in a certain way. So you're looking for cards that do a very specific thing. Do you have an easy way of figuring out I'm looking for a card that does this, and then how do you go about searching for that card, whether it's in your collection or over Scryfall?
It really does depend on what the card does. If I'm looking to add ramp to my deck, then I have this wonderful app, Deck to Builder, and it has all of my cards in it. So I will just open up the app, find what I'm looking for, and see if I have it. Because I'm not going to buy ramp. Because I don't want to buy ramp. If it's if it's a card that's essential to the deck. Because with ramp, in theory, if you're going to build a 60 card casual, you could put 4 copies of Soul Ring in it. That sounds horrific and boring and miserable all the way around, but you could do it. To be fair, our group could not do it. We play by legacy rules, so no 4 Soul Rings. But it's just, there's a whole bunch of different I mean, there are so many different options. So I try and find, especially with ramp, find something that fits your theme. If I could find a cat that made mana, or let me search for a land when it came into play, it would be in the deck. Just that kind of thing. Especially with 60 card, because fit the theme, you're going to put that in your 100 card deck, but you're going to need, you need 7 pieces of ramp, and they all have to be different. Whereas for the 60 card, you need 4 pieces of ramp, and they can all be the same card. So if you find something that fits your theme perfectly, you can put 4 copies in. I want something a little more original, so I try not to do that. But
right.
So I try and mix it up. Enchantment removal. I could have ran 4 copies of the Kasali Pride Mage, but I like to mix it up and try other things. So try and mix and match a little bit. But yeah,
especially
generally,
over play periods, you get to see what works better and what falls short of expectation.
And a lot of times, what I find is that each of them has a strong suit and somewhere where they're weak. If you're locked down and you can't play creatures, and you're locked down by an artifact or an enchantment, you better have a way to get around that. And if you picked 4 Kasali Pride Mages, you don't. So why not mix it up a little bit? Sure, it doesn't, it limits how well you optimize the deck, but, we aren't trying to optimize. We're trying to have fun. So let's mix it up.
Obviously, ramp is the basic thing.
Yeah.
And where I struggle, especially with building decks, is coming up with this is a funky way, or this is where I want the deck to go mechanically.
Right.
It's easy to, I say it's easy, but it's easy to go for a creature type theme deck.
Sure.
In terms of cats, for instance, there's plenty of life gain, there's plenty of card draw, there's plenty of removal.
Right.
All stapled to cats. And that's great. And not to say that your deck was easy build, because to find the Hungry Lynx and then think about, all right, do I want to make everything cats? Do I want whatever?
And to me, this is why when I do a deck build, any deck build, I've heard a lot of people say, it's so hard to build on a blank slate. I'm looking at this blank sheet of paper and I'm trying to come up with what the deck should be. I never start with a blank slate. I always have an idea before I even get started. Well, it's just the deck for the Hungry Lynx. It was because I previewed the card and I wanted to build around it. So, I didn't start with a blank slate. I started with 4 copies of Hungry Lynx. Where do I go from here? Okay, well then I can take that card and break it down into its parts and say, how can I make this work? What can I do here? How can this work? How can this work? And you just sort of, flip it around, and then you start building off of that. So if you're in the middle of preview season and you've seen a card that you think is spectacular and you really want to build around it, well, there you go. You no longer have a blank slate. You just found a card. And it doesn't even have to be a commander. It can be any card. If you're just this card is amazing, I need to run this in a deck. It's okay, well, if it doesn't fit any of the decks you currently have, then you're going to want to create a new deck. Well, okay, so right off the bat, your commander has to be at least those colors, maybe more, or color, whatever. And then just sort of build out from there. And then pretty soon, maybe that one card you started with isn't even that relevant to the deck anymore. But it got you started. It got your creative juices flowing and started, setting up what you want to do. So
yeah, I've been slowly but surely reorganizing my collection, because I had it all set. The pandemic hit, and then I just kept buying boosters just out of stress, boredom, etc.
Yep.
And then I started buying boxes of set boosters, and boy, those things are great. But I was man, I have so many cards, I should start building decks. And I think that is kind of that's my bane.
Okay.
Is I get stuck on trying to figure out I get stuck on trying to figure out well, what do I want this deck to do? I have access to all of these cards without needing to buy a single one, and I flip through them. I'm like, oh, this could be fun and this could be fun. Like, do they belong together? Whatever. And then I'll put a pile aside or whatever, and then come back to it in like a couple days and add more, take some away, and it's still a pile of like 100 cards, and I'm like, and I guess it's the like probably. Just by building decks, I will get past this idea of just like, well, like I want to build a deck with this card. Why don't I put it in this deck that has these colors? Even if it's not like helpful, it doesn't do the thing the deck wants to do.
Right.
And it's this idea of like my decks are like higher stakes because I've only built so many 60 card decks. So it's like, well, I want it to be fun, but like I mean, this is advice that I've heard plenty of times as like an artistic person of like, oh, well, like you're a writer, you write and write and write, just keep writing, just don't stop writing, write on a regular basis,
right.
Don't shame yourself for stop writing, just like write until you don't write and then write more, and some of it is gonna be garbage. And that's just a fact of life. And I think it's kind of the same way with decks, is like, especially where we are playing 60 card casual, garbage decks are, the name of the game. And you want it to function, sure. But kind of trying to stick to the plan is, I think, my hardest thing, because I'm like, oh, like I've got, and that's where I struggle, is like, even if I have an idea of a deck, it quickly loses focus and then it becomes bloated.
Right.
So how do you keep that focus of a deck? Or like, if you realize your deck's becoming bloated, how do you cut out the cards that you realize aren't doing the job?
Okay, well, with 60 card, for the most part, you get away with one or two cards. There's only one or two cards extra that you could put in there that don't fit your theme, because most of the time you need every slot. If you put in 2 or 3 cards that don't fit your theme, that are just cool cards and I want them in there, well, that's 3 out of 60. Okay, now take it out of 100. And now suddenly you've got 5 cards that don't fit your theme in a commander deck. I mean, the odds are you're going to draw one of them every game, and that's maybe not where you want to be. As far as knowing when to pull them out or how to spot it and realize what you're doing, I am the worst. I am the worst. I have so many pet cards, so many. This would just be so cool. And then I put it in, and it doesn't work. And of course it didn't work. You knew it wasn't going to work when you did it, because you've tried it before in other decks, and it still doesn't work. And I mean, for me, most of the time, it means go play the deck. And just at that last moment when your deck is doing really well, but and then things turn and it's looking ugly, and you need that card, and you flip over the top card of your deck. It's like, this is gonna be it. No, and it's that little junky card you threw in there because you think it's gonna be so cool, and it just did nothing. You get that pounded into you a few times, and then suddenly you're going back through your deck and just like, okay, this is out, and then you find something else that's that's still cool but fits with the theme of your deck a little better, or however, and then you start pulling it apart. I mean, there's a handful of people I think who can build excellent decks right off the bat, but I am not one of them. So, you got to build. You just got to build the deck and go.
I think it's tough for me because I think I just looked it up on Skyfall. There's 22,195 cards currently, as of recording, that are legal in Legacy.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard to look at that number and be like, but there's probably something better. Or but where do I start? It's such an overwhelming number. Like that also includes lands and garbage cards that you'd never play, or honestly cards that are too expensive.
And I mean, this is why I don't look at the number.
Yeah,
I don't want to know how many cards I could choose from. I mean, this is why theme decks are so popular in the first place.
Yeah.
If I'm going to choose, like you said, goblins, I'm going to choose goblins as my theme. And the only creatures in this deck are going to be goblins. Well, right off the bat, you've taken that 22,000 cards, and you've eliminated most of them because your only creatures are going to be goblins. So every card that isn't a creature, or every card that is a creature but not a goblin, is now gone from that 22,000. There's still a lot of goblins. It's not like you now suddenly have no choice, and every single goblin that exists now has to go into your deck. You know, this isn't us from an earlier season when we built our pests. We built pests, or
it was germs.
Just me? Germs, right? I mean, yes, every single one of them had to go in. That because that was pushed. That's how we pushed the theme. With a theme like goblins or elves or even soldiers, and you can get even cats. You get options, but it comes down to a much more manageable pile, and you can say, okay, I think I've done the best I can do with this, and then you go from there.
I've been tinkering with a 60 card deck, and it's based around Nadir, Agent of the Duskinal.
Yeah.
And I think we'll end up showcasing this deck as my deck tail for episode 8. So he's 5 and a black. He's a 3/3 legendary creature from Commander Legends. He's an uncommon. It says whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Nadir, Agent of the Duskinal. When Nadir leaves the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to its power. And it's interesting. I've got one. So far, I only have one copy in the deck. I think I might put in more. But where my mind directly went was, this just says tokens. This doesn't say creature tokens. This is any token that you have. If a token that you control is leaving the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Right.
So my mind went to treasures because treasures have been.
They're all over the place. You can get plenty of them.
There's too many. We'll talk about this, in a couple episodes when I have it more down packed. I think I have to order a few more copies because, as we're talking in this episode right now, I'm realizing, the deck really relies on Nadir to do its thing. And, we talked previously, especially, we talked a little bit about this before the episode, but we talked about your Pier and Toothy deck.
Yeah.
And how it relies on the
legend rule.
The legend rule, which you don't generally come into contact with in Commander. And it's like a nice little twist on how we normally play. So if I put in more, he'll leave the battlefield because a new one's coming in. So I may be,
You're finding a way for the card to work in a 60 card deck that it wouldn't normally work in a commander deck. Yeah. And it can.
Right.
There's hoops you don't really need to jump through to make that happen. So I think that sounds like fun.
And we're gonna take a quick break, but when we get back, we're gonna talk more about just general where we can get ideas for decks.
Yeah.
Where we can get where we spark our thoughts in terms of decks. So we'll be right back.
All right.
This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by
The Big Idea. I got a big idea.
Yeah, you do.
I've got more than one.
Whoa.
Maybe I'll build a deck with it. Them. Instead of the big idea as the commander, what about the big idea in a 60 card? Something to think about. I'm not going to elaborate on this.
Back to you. Hey, welcome back. We were just talking about some big ideas we had for some casual 60 card decks.
I got some great ideas.
Like what?
Oh, okay. Maybe they're not great. They're just big.
Oh,
I got some big ideas.
Ah.
All right. So where are we getting these ideas from?
Who knows? I mean, usually I get my ideas from opening packs and then being like, "Ooh, this card, I like this." I put it to the side, and generally, this is where it fails me. I forget about it.
Yeah.
So I think if any of you out there are listening to this, take my advice. Do as I say, not as I do. Write these ideas down in a place that you won't lose it. I now currently have I use Google Sheets a lot.
Yeah.
I love spreadsheets.
Yeah.
But it would work as well with a Google Doc or something of the similar ilk.
I use the notepad on my iPhone, and I've got one of them. It just says deck ideas, and it's just, oh, that's a good idea.
Deck ideas.
And just stick it in there, and away you go. So, and I've always got my phone with me, so it works out.
I have a Discord server where it's just me, so then I can have like different channels. I've got like one for like time codes on certain like YouTube videos if they're like super long, if it's like a D&D thing,
Sure.
where like I'll be like, oh, I stopped here or whatever. And one of them is now deck ideas or
Nice.
like cards I want to buy.
Yeah.
I've
got that one too.
Yeah, it so that it's not just clogging up my cart on whatever website.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting emails being like, "Hey, you got some cards in your cart." And it's just always nice to be able to go back, reference those cards on quick notice.
Yeah.
So take that advice.
Yes. And
Do what you will.
I will say that as far as coming up with ideas, folks, you're hearing my source of information here, and it's the same one that you're listening to right now. The internet, between my Twitter feed, where I regularly reach out and say, what card would be really cool with this? And I give you the card that I was thinking of, and then it's like, I know that there's something here, but I just can't figure it out. I can't see the connection. I don't know where this is going. And then I've got the 1,000 people on that are following me, sending in card ideas. Now, sure, some of them are not going to be particularly inventive, and some of them are probably ideas you already had, especially if you've gone and looked. But a lot of times, I will get stuff and I'll be like, that is interesting, or that's different, not something I considered. And and the key is don't limit them. Don't limit these people who are going to give you these ideas. It's like, sure, maybe you were thinking about it for a commander deck, so you're looking for ideas in these two colors. Well, don't tell them that. Just put it out there, unless it's a situation where what works well with this, and it's an obvious. It's something that's obvious that that blue does so much better, but you're not going to use blue. Then then you say, yeah, but not blue, because I don't want all my answers to be blue cards. But leave it open, and it's amazing how many times, and I've done this plenty of times, where it's like, wow, that takes it in a whole different direction, and suddenly the commander I was thinking about is not the right way to go. You're looking at you're looking at a different color set. And you get pointed to a different commander. It's just amazing how quickly this sort of thing can really work in your favor. So between Twitter and just random friends online, all sort wherever you go and you're getting feedback, go there, get feedback. So much of this is, we all get locked in our own little patterns as far as how we're thinking about it. And inviting somebody else in suddenly opens up a whole new line of thought that you hadn't even considered. And then you can just go running down that path. And that's one of my favorite places to get deck ideas, or at least card ideas for the deck.
That actually just reminded me of actually, I guess my take on this, which is just play more Magic. Deck ideas kind of come from, at least for me, from certain interactions happening and being like, oh, I want to do this more. I've talked about this plenty on this podcast, especially in the early episodes, where playing the Dominaria pre-release, I got Traxos Scourge of Karug out. I got Onsera's Wings onto him, and it gave him Vigilance, so it was a flying 8/8 trample, lifelink, beautiful.
Right.
And so like that was another one of my early 60 card decks was mono white Traxos Fly Vig. And I'll probably bring that one back because it's fun. So it's like, if it's the same with writer's block, where it's like if you have writer's block, if you're stuck on writing, just write. So it's like if you're stuck on building a deck, just play more Magic, and you'll figure something out.
Well, exactly. Part of the idea with the just play, you get inspired by what's going on. The first game of Magic I ever played involved a rabid wombat, and my friends were putting auras on it because they'd only been playing a short period of time, and nobody really knew or even cared that these cards probably weren't very good. But it inspired, I just thought, this is amazing, and this is really cool. And I got into Magic. Yeah, Rabid Wombat brought me into Magic. Who knew? But it meant that I built another one later. Mm-hmm. And I followed a very similar vein to it in that, playing the enchantments and making it work. Now, it was nowhere... It was a completely different thing than what I had built. Mm-hmm. Because before, it was just a random stack of cards with virtually almost every green, red, and white. I don't remember what colors I played, but it was virtually all of the three colors that I had. Because I had, at that point, I think I had 150 cards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you have like 200 now? Is that what's...
a little bit more than that. Just a little over that. But it just meant that, now I followed that same theme with the enchantments and auras and making and going about all this stuff. But that deck idea came from a game. And this happens all the time. I mean, the more you play, the more you're going to get, the more deck ideas you're going to get. And a lot of times you'll pull this from the friends you play with.
I think it's great because you're using your own experience, and you're using the stories that you get from playing as your inspiration, because it's like, I want to recreate the feeling I got when I played this.
Yeah.
I want to recreate that experience. And even if you're never going to have that exact experience again, it brings along new experience, honestly.
Yeah.
And what's the word? It breeds a certain type of gameplay. It breeds the type of gameplay, the level of gameplay, the power that you are looking for, if you're using your own experience as your rubric.
As far as, other ideas, take your bad ideas and put it out there. I've had more than one game where after the initial game, it was like nothing worked for the deck. It just didn't work, but I still thought it was a great idea. So I literally just, guys, what do you think? And I sort of laid out the cards and explained what I was trying to do and said, can this work? Did I just have bad luck, or do you have better suggestions, ways to improve the deck, or just, a different idea or a different way you can go? And I've had everything from, no, this doesn't work because of XYZ, or yes, this works, but you should try this instead. I built a deck around Master of Cruelties, and I tried using Dwarven Warrior, which for those who don't know, it's a 3-mana 1/1 creature, and it taps and allows a creature with a power of 2 or less to attack unblocked. And it's like, okay, that's great, but there are much better cards than Dwarven Warrior that do the exact same thing. In fact, there's a creature that costs 1 and a red that does the exact same thing. It's just straight up cheaper. And it's not a dwarf, but I didn't need a dwarf. I just needed the creature. So it was the little things to improve the deck and make it run a little smoother, make it run a little faster, adjust this, turn this knob. And, and with that deck, it wasn't really a turning the knob. It was, we changed enough cards that suddenly it worked. And it, so essentially we took my bad idea, used other people's ideas, and turned it into a good idea. So that's one way to make it work.
Yeah, and it's those things too, where it's like you'll just go throughout the day and think of certain cards and be like, how does this work with this? And then and I think that for me, what I need to do is just play the deck earlier, because playing a deck, like you said, will sort out the things that aren't working at all, the things that are working less than desirable, the things that are kind of working, the things that don't work, the things that are working, etc., etc. And then you can choose out of those categories, like, all right, these things don't work the way I want it to, so I'm going to take them out. I'm going to replace them with X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
It's not about optimizing, but it is about making a deck playable. But I think where I fail at deck building is getting it out the door. Like, that first step is playing it once and then playing it 3 more times, because playing it once is not going to be any sort of data point for what works and what doesn't, because you could have a really, really lucky game.
Yeah.
I was just playing the precon of the blue-white spirit from Crimson Vow, and it was the first time I had ever played it, straight out of the box, shuffled it up, played. First, 6 turns, I was beating down my opponents, and then 1 board wipe later, I was stuck drawing for the rest of the game, until I died. And, that doesn't mean that deck is bad, and that doesn't mean that deck, I should have just, gone all out and finished the game early. It doesn't mean either of those things. I played it once.
Right.
Granted, we could talk forever about how modern precons are, overpowered, but that'll be, I don't know, next season.
Yeah, that's for a different day. Another way, and for me this is kind of something I love to do, is find the weird card. Find the weird card and just, how can I build with this? My personal favorite, when I've talked about this before, is Day of the Dragons. Day of the Dragons is an enchantment. It costs 7 mana. It's 4 blue, blue, blue. And it reads, when Day of the Dragons enters the battlefield, exile all creatures you control. Then create that many 5/5 red dragon creature tokens with flying. When Day of the Dragons leaves the battlefield, sacrifice all the dragons you control, then return the exiled cards to the battlefield under your control. Now take that and then just run with that. This is weird and bizarre. And in the end, you're probably not going to want to build an entire deck revolving around a 7 mana enchantment. But it does it lets you look at things and say to yourself, okay, so do I want to build a deck that's loaded down with a bunch of small enter the battlefield trigger creatures and a bunch of mass removal? So, get out your 5 creatures or whatever, wrath the entire board, or no, not wrath the entire board. Get out your 5 creatures, play your Day of Dragons, get your 5/5 dragons out there, do your thing, and when you're running low on dragons, then wrath the board. You'll lose 1 dragon, then all 5 of your little creatures come back, all the enter the battlefield triggers go off again, and away you go. You just make things, just try and make it work. And, and with a card like this, it goes all over the place. I've messed around with this one using token creatures because I think it was in a blue-green deck, and I built, so I would get a ton of saprolings, and then they would turn into dragons. Now, sure, when Day of the Dragons left the battlefield, I wouldn't get the saprolings because they were tokens. They're gone. But I did get bigger 5/5 dragons, and that was cool. So, all kinds of stuff. And then, when it leaves the battlefield, when it enters the battlefield, well, how do you make flicker work with that? How does how do you build a deck where flicker becomes that advantageous to make this happen, so that you're getting the enter the battlefield and then the exit, and somehow you're getting a benefit to this, and you just go on and look at all these scenarios where this is relevant, and then at some point you're like, okay, well, I got the idea. Now, do I want to eliminate some part of this and build around this new concept? Because these are ideas that you don't get from your run-of-the-mill card, because your run-of-the-mill card doesn't do this. Find that weird and wacky card and think to yourself, okay, can I build an entire deck around this, and how would I do that? And then you start looking at other cards in different ways. So it's an interesting little way to get things started, so that you're not just stuck with that blank slate.
Right. It's exactly. It's always nice to kind of start with a card, go from there, see if it does what you want it to do.
Right.
I guess this is a subjective question, or at least a question that would require a subjective answer. At what point for you is a deck like too optimized, or at least like too off of the theme? Like, theme in this scenario would be whatever the deck is trying to do. So like, you could load your deck up with mana drains and whatever, and have this like totally optimized deck, but like it doesn't do the characteristic of the deck.
For me, at least, for the most part, if I've got the cards in there that make the deck do what it's supposed to do, then I'm pretty happy already. Now, if I'm looking, if I see a new card come out, and I'm like, wow, that would do the thing that one of those key cards does so much better, then yeah, maybe I'll put that in. Maybe. It'll depend on how much better it's going to make the deck, because I don't want a deck that's going to slaughter on a regular basis, because then every time I play that deck, I'm just going to have 3 people who are trying to kick the crap out of me right from the start. And I don't want that. Because I don't want my games to turn into archenemy games ever. If it's going to be an archenemy game, then it better be at the last. You better be in the last turn or 2 turns, because I want it to end fast. I don't want this to be from the start. The area where I really watch more than anything is with the minor stuff. If I'm looking at a card that draws cards at a more effective rate than one of the cards in my deck, do I really want to add that in? It'll make the deck better. It certainly streamlines it. But in the end, it just, how much polish do you want on your deck?
Yeah.
And when it comes to stuff that's not essential to the core, I'm not that interested in making that much better.
Yeah. I guess where I come from is like, I fall into the trap too often of like trying to make my deck do the thing, where I then end up realizing after I've sleeved it up and put the lands in, and then whatever, I guess in the other order, put the lands in and then sleeved it up. Yeah. But I realized like, I don't have enough, removal, or I don't have any card draw. And I guess like that kind of comes with practice. But how I guess it's the opposite, or the inverse question of how much is too much on theme. Is there a thing as too much on theme?
depends on your theme, I guess. We just did, not that long ago, we did our Kamigawa decks. Mm-hmm. And we both stayed on theme really well, but in theory, we could have been including Kamigawa lands. We could have been including, we could have said any ramp has to be from Kamigawa block. And we didn't. Because in the end, we built these decks, and my intention was at some point to put the deck together. So there was certainly a certain amount of give that I was willing to put on that. Other decks, if you follow theme too tightly, it can become too powerful. But again, that's a product of your deck, of your group. Maybe it needs to be that powerful. Maybe you've chosen a theme that reduces the power of your deck, and every other card outside that theme has to be the optimal card for your deck to be able to survive in your play group. And that can be the case in just about every play group, depending on how ridiculous your theme is.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's interesting too, because I also come from the camp of like there's not enough interaction happening right now, and maybe that's just in the commander scene, but at the same time, like, it's not necessarily necessary. Like, with multiplayer, and maybe you shouldn't, fully lean on this, but with multiplayer, there are two other opponents that have a similar opponent. So, out of the three of you, hopefully one of you has the answer that you need. And so I guess less than, add more interaction and more of, at least consider more interaction. And if it doesn't make your deck do your thing better, or more, not even more consistently, if it doesn't do the deck thing of the deck, then weigh how much you want it in your deck or not. But I would come from the camp of do at least consider more interaction, because more interaction means that your deck may be able to do the thing like you want it to, or at least not fall apart at the smallest sign of board wipe, targeted removal, whatever, taxation. But yeah, I mean, deck building's difficult, and the thing I need to keep in mind as we start to wrap this up is twofold. One, build more decks, because that gives you the experience of building decks. And two, play those decks even if they're utter garbage, because then you learn why they're garbage. Yeah. It's the tale as old as time. It's the fable of the rabid wombat. Because, I mean, I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, I hope I'm not stepping over any boundaries, your original Rabbit Wombat deck was probably utter garbage, but, like, you had fun with it, you learned from it, you hold that the essence of that deck as a serious memory that you use as your mantra in building decks and playing games.
And yeah, the deck was utter garbage. Of course it was. I mean,
and now you've got a new one. Yeah. With your newly obtained copies of Rabid Wombat.
Right.
You gotta.
Which is just slightly better than the rancid garbage that I built so long ago. Because the deck still isn't good.
Right. But who cares?
But who cares, right? I'm going for the moment. And
exactly.
Honestly, if your big idea is to create some deck that's going to allow you to dominate your group over and over again, come up with a new idea. Look for something that's going to make the table say wow, or create great laughs, because that's really what you're looking for.
And so as we continue to wrap this up, we'll be back next week with Temple's Treasures. You think we forgot? Nah. Just because we finished with enchantments doesn't mean we can't go on to sorceries.
Yeah.
The next best thing. Next week we're going to talk about a handful of sorceries prior to 8th edition. Their first printing was prior to 8th edition. And they're going to be the color of...
Let's go with green sorceries.
Green. The color of money. The color of leaves. The color of vomit. The color of boogers. The color of stinky gas.
I'm sure we'll find some green sorceries.
So make sure you come back for that. And this is going to be, we're still going to follow the same rules of EDH rec decks and stuff like that. Because we're not just talking about 60 card here. We're talking about deep.
We got it all.
Deep philosophical ideas that really hold weight in the world of Magic. So be sure to share these episodes so that everybody can hear me shit on Bruce's Wombat deck. But hey. We're Temple of the False Pod. Our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 54. Again, we'll be back next week. Have a great night, and may your 5th land be the Temple.
Bye!
Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter @falsepodmtg. Bruce is @manaburned and I'm @AndyWeekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your 5th land be the Temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!